What's good, guys? This is Daniel, aka Young Chapel. You know how it be. This is Blunt Talk, the podcast in which we tell you the truth and nothing but the truth. Uh, this is the pilot episode. I hope that if you're tuning in, that you enjoy this episode, and I want your feedback and honest comments or reactions. And basically, to dive in a little bit, well, we're all in quarantine, so what better to decide, what better thing to do than basically start a podcast? So that's what I decided to do. For the following weeks, I'm gonna be doing episodes, and I'm gonna be talking various topics besides things like basketball, baseball, soccer, football, all the sports, because I'm a sports junkie, so that's an easy thing to talk about. But not only that, I'm gonna be talking a little bit more about like social media and like hip hop and rap and other types of genres of music, especially diving into like culture and what's happening right now in our society, especially with coronavirus. There's a lot to talk about because we're not doing anything. And that's pretty much it. So I've been meaning to do this for a long time now, and I always said that I was going to do it and this or that or postponing it or whatever. But I finally told myself, stop fucking around and to do an episode. So here we go. This is the pilot episode. The first segment that I wanted to jump on about with the podcast that I'm doing right now is, well, my favorite sport is basketball, so I'm going to talk. Today's episode is going to be primarily nothing but basketball. So if you have something to say about that, let me know personally, and I know what to do. But basically, the first segment is going to be underappreciated or underrated NBA players, and I'm gonna just be doing this like every now and then when there's very little to talk about. I'm gonna just keep mentioning like NBA players that I think deserve more appreciation or that were not recognized as good as there should have been. Obviously, you know that the first person I'm gonna make an argument for is Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony was the definition of a baller when it came to like scoring the ball nonstop. He was someone that you could always like rely upon to like give you a bucket. I believe that like when he was playing for the Knicks, that he was at the top peak of like his offensive percentages and like performances and everything. He broke the Knicks record for like most points in the game. So I think like that's a pretty good evidence himself like to cement his place in Knicks greatest Knicks of all time. Although he wasn't as successful with the Knicks like win wise and like playoff wise, because the Eastern Conference was kind of dominated by Miami during that time. So if he wasn't playing with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, you kind of were under them, and that's sadly what happened to Carmelo. But I think it's fair to say that overall his whole career is underappreciated because in college he was a beast. He won the national championship as a freshman with Syracuse. Not only that, he was part of the NCAA All-Tourney team. He was an NCAA All-Region. He was a most important player of the tournament. And other things that he did also were like for high school, he was one of the McDonald's top Americans, like in his class. He was also, forgot to mention that he was also like for college, he was an All Big East tournament player, and he was the Big East Freshman of the Year and the Big East Rookie of the Year as well. Not only that, but apart from all the awards he won in college, he also was a member of like the U.S. gold medal winning team. I believe he won it 2 times. Not only that, but he kind of took Denver to the conference finals for the first time in the franchise's history in a long, long time, which is forgotten by a lot of people. Like kids nowadays don't appreciate the fact that Carmelo stayed in Denver for a while and actually made that team relevant for what it is. Like Allen Iverson was still decently productive when he was playing with Carmelo. He had Chauncey Billups, Kenyon Martin, but all those pieces wouldn't make a playoff run the way they did without Carmelo being there, for sure. And I remember because I watched the other day, it was like the 2009 conference finals that they made, one I was just talking about. It was the Denver Nuggets versus the Los Angeles Lakers. And god damn, Kobe Bryant murdered them fools. But Carmelo Anthony still dropped like 38 in game one. But that overall was like a 6-game series, and then Kobe ended up making it to the finals that year, and not Carmelo. That's the closest Carmelo's ever been to the NBA finals. And I understand that as an argument when you're saying that, well, he's still pretty good, but he never made it past the conference finals. He only made it to the conference finals once. But the way that he was such a good isolation scorer and you could always depend on Carmelo, for like to give you a bucket when you needed it the most. I think that's something that people forget most of the time when it comes to like talking about Carmelo Anthony. Not only that, in the later part of his career when like the later part of his stint with the Knicks and like when he started bouncing around teams now, he became a really good shooter and primarily just a shooter, like a guy that you could depend on to make a three-pointer when you needed it. Especially in today's NBA, I think that was pretty cool for him because he's showing show that okay, I can't just do mid-range fadeaways or like post-ups and all these things. I gotta actually learn how to shoot if I want to stay in the league. Although he didn't stay that much in the league because of the issue that he had when that he wanted to be a star or at least a starter, and he could never get over the fact that he needed to like be like a six man or like a role player off the bench. He still did his thing consistently, in my opinion. Sure, he was like kind of offish with the Oklahoma City Thunder, but like really, the Oklahoma City Thunder, that team never really developed anything because like Russell Westbrook was uh, the victim of teams that just couldn't push to the first round year after year after year. They added Paul George, they couldn't do anything. Victor Oladipo couldn't do anything. So like Carmelo Anthony was already in a team that I feel like wasn't gonna really do much. So the fact that his expectations were set that high at that level is kind of blasphemous for me. For his career, Carmelo Anthony Carmelo Anthony averaged 23.6 points per game, which is kind of decent for a career average because he didn't even run Rookie of the Year. LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, that draft class was stacked when he entered to the league. He had a 3-point field goal percentage historically, which was 34.8. That is not that good, and especially when I look back into it, I did never think it'd be that low because like nowadays you think of Carmelo Anthony as a spot-up shooter, but the one stat that was really surprising for me, I mean, actually two stats, was the player efficiency rating, which is 19.9, which is outstanding because I think of Carmelo Anthony as a player that shoots a lot of shots. And although he makes a decent amount of them, he still shoots too much shots. So I didn't know that his player efficiency rating would be that high. And his winning share percentage is 102.0, which is actually had me a little shook reading it, and I didn't believe it at first. Overall, I know I might sound like a biased Knicks fan when I say about this, but Carmelo Anthony was one of the few people that actually gave New York a shot and that actually tried to stay there and try to get us wins. And they had a decent team around him with Iman Shumpert, J.R. Smith, point guards they had during the years like Mike Bibby, Baron Davis, Chauncey Billups, Jeremy Lin, Pablo Prigioni. They had Amari Stoudemire, which although it was like at the drop-off production level portion of his career, he still was like pretty good that first couple of years with the Knicks and the first year that he was with Carmelo. They had Tyson Chandler, which not only like was the last time Tyson Chandler was being a productive player in his career, he won a Defensive Player of the Year for the Knicks. The one season they won 53 games. So overall, he made it so that the Knicks kind of had talent around him and they built a team around him. And it was like New York finally was kind of good for once with Carmelo Anthony leading the way for the Knicks. The second player that I emphasize so much and I'm a big fan of is Brandon Roy. First off, the man was a three-time All-Star, but he only played for like 4 to 5 seasons in the league, and he played for Portland. And if you look at Portland's trajectory during like the 2000s, weren't doing shit in the playoffs until Brandon Roy came to town, and he finally gave them a consistent team. And besides him, he had LaMarcus Aldridge, was like earlier when he was just like a youngling, and the man was balling. And them both were a dynamic duo that was unstoppable in the Western Conference. They made it to his first time around. They finished with a 41 win and 41 loss record, but they did not make the playoffs that year. They finished as the 9th seed. But then both seasons after, they both finished with 52 and 53 wins, and they were a 5 seed and a 6 seed in the playoffs, which I think was showing that like having that one superstar and key person for your team can truly carry you to a certain extent, but can get you over the hump unless you get more people around him. Not only that, he was a big time baller for the University of Washington. I remember watching him like with his highlights in college, and I just knew this guy was going to be a beast in the league. He was the Rookie of the Year, and he was a 2-time All-NBA selection. And that's crazy to think about because, like, in the late 2000s, like, you had shooting guards in that conference and wing players like Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, Ray Allen, Joe Johnson, Vince Carter, Rip Hamilton, which people forget about, like, in our generation, I believe, Allen Iverson. And it's kind of crazy to think about that he still managed to get appreciation and nods for the little time that he was in the league. Unfortunately, he had too many knee injuries and, like, his legs just couldn't hold up, and he had to retire from the league at a young age. And he tried to return with Minnesota one year, but he didn't even play like more than 5 games that season. So, like, that was the sign that, like, it was time to call it quits. Uh, I feel like, honestly, if he would have stayed in the league for more time than that, he probably would have become like he probably would still, like, today, be like a top 10 shooting guard or a top 10 wing player in our league, especially if he would have stayed in Portland. And if they somehow, like, with the injuries, they would have gotten like the draft picks, like Damian Lillard, for example. Imagine having Damian Lillard and Brandon Roy be like the top guard combination in your team. Like, that would just be devastating. And the one thing I think people forget about too with Brandon Roy is this man was clutch, like the definition of it. Like, against Dallas, the 1 year in the playoffs, I believe they were down like by 20. Hold up, let's see if we can find Brandon Roy versus Dallas. It was 2011 actually. He scored 18 points in the fourth quarter to help them win in Game 4 of the on those years playoffs, and that was crazy because it showed you that Brandon Roy could actually hold his own against teams like the Dallas Mavericks, which had Dirk Nowitzki. That was the year the Dallas Mavericks won the title. So, like, they were like the first stop in that championship run for the Mavericks. But yeah, overall, even though, like, Brandon Roy got the recognition he did and, like, the appreciation during his playing career, I feel like since he played so little and he got injured so much, it's like a Derrick Rose syndrome situation where, like, people, like, forget about, like, how good he actually was. And now he's a coach, so I mean, he's still involved with basketball, but overall, I think Brandon Roy deserves to be up there and talks about, like, one of the most clutch players or one of the most better shooting guards in the history of basketball, especially when shooting guards is like a position in which, like, it's kind of iffy on, like, the top, on the middle and, like, bottom tier of the top players in those positions, because you have Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Dwayne Wade, and then there's like a kind of a significant drop off or like huge arguments and discussions and debates because, like, sure, you can mention people like Ray Allen, Reggie Miller. You could also say someone like the likes of, I'm trying to think, someone that was like back in before him, like, you see what I mean? Me having an issue with trying to come up with top shooting guards off the top of my head. It's like the prime time example of how Brandon Roy should at least be up there for the mid-tier conversation of the greatest shooting guards to ever have played. Thirdly, one player that I want to bring up that I think is also subject to, like, being forgotten due to the injuries of his career, Penny Hardaway. Holy, this man was like Magic Johnson 2.0. He was like a 6'7" point guard out of Memphis University. And that was during the time Memphis wasn't like a program that everyone, like, cared about or, like, was even nationally recognized like that. And man managed to have impressed Shaquille O'Neal in Orlando Magic and was having Shaquille O'Neal beg and plead the organization to draft him. He, like, that was just insane. And, like, if you guys don't really know that much about Penny Hardaway, I suggest to, like, watch the 30 for 30 on the Orlando Magic and Shaquille O'Neal and, like, the whole history of how the team started, because they managed to land 2 back-to-back #1 picks with Shaquille O'Neal and then Penny Hardaway. Well, actually, no. They drafted Chris Webber, now I think about it, but they traded him to the Golden State Warriors for Penny Hardaway, and I believe 3 to 4 draft picks, which is kind of crazy because nowadays we're known to, in the league, is known to, like, have crazy amount of picks in the trades because, like, people are just trying to do the most to go over the top to gain that player. But, like, back in the day, like, if you added 1 or 2 picks, that already would have been like they're doing too much. So they did too much to try to get this man. That's how much it showed you the potential this guy had. Uh, It's Penny Hardaway. He earned the Penny a nickname because his real name is Anthony. Because like apparently something about his mom or grandma saying like his name with like a southern accent and like the way he would call like say Penny. It sounded with a southern twang or something to do with that. But Mance was a beast. Uh, he received Magic Johnson comparisons, as I told you. Like everyone was saying that him and Shaq in Orlando were gonna be like the second coming of the Showtime Lakers. Which honestly, if Shaquille O'Neal would have stayed there, he definitely would have been the second coming of the Showtime Lakers being there. Not only that, but Penny Hardaway, like, look up his highlights. The man was a beast. He would drive through the rim, be able to pass it, and like the stats don't do that much justice to it because they get filtered in with like the later stats in his career. Because he, after his stint in Orlando, he kind of went down because of all the injuries and the ways management failed to like treat him right. It's kind of like a Kawhi Leonard situation in a way. But overall, this man was pretty much a monster. He dropped like 18.5 points per game and over 7 assists per game when he was in the Magic. And I'd suggest to you guys that you guys watch, if you have ESPN, there's a series now because he's the head coach of Memphis University, the one that he played for. And it's a series called The Hardaway, in which it shows you like the daily regimen and all the things they got to go through day in and day out with practice. And it shows you a little bit of how like the recruits and the freshmen and all those kids that are brought to the program, thanks to Penny, are trying to become NBA players. Because what better way to learn how to go to the NBA than to be trained by a coach who played in the NBA. And it also mentions about the show also will go into like issues like the James Wiseman scandal that happened, which I think is very phony. Because like if you guys weren't aware, what happened was Penny Hardaway used to be the coach at one of the Memphis high schools, and he won like 2 state titles. And then he had recruited James Wiseman to like move to the high school he had coached to, but then like the family couldn't afford it, so like Penny Hardaway had helped him to move from Nashville all the way to Memphis. No, to hold up, because I want to get my facts right. So Memphis, yeah, okay, I was right. So he wanted to move him from Nashville, Tennessee, to Memphis, Tennessee, where his high school was located at. And then not only that, he managed to recruit him to Memphis University as the #1 recruit in the country as soon, like weeks after he got the head coaching job at the University of Memphis. Of course, the NCAA, being the greedy people they are, they basically wanted to, they basically told Memphis University, James Wiseman's ineligible to play because Penny Hardaway was a supporter in him getting to the university, which the NCAA is very strict on, like how coaches be giving money to the athletes that go to their schools. But it's kind of bogus because he never gave him money to go to the college. He just gave money to the family to move to the city so that he could go and play for his high school team the year before that. Overall, not meaning to talk about his career that much, but like the man was a beast, as I said, and he just demonstrated skill on the court that was like very visible and like ahead of its time. Like if he were to play in the league today, he probably would have been like a Ben Simmons with better shooting mechanics than him. And I believe that if he stayed with Shaquille O'Neal in Orlando, they probably would have won at least 2 or 3 championships together. Now we're going on to the second segment of the episode today. I was doing some research, and I basically compiled like some teams of all-time starting fives with a 6-man of college basketball players. So I'm just gonna talk about like which teams I think would have the best chances of going on a March Madness Cinderella run type thing and win it all, and like how the teams would fare against each other, as well as just talk about the players. First team that I made up was the Michigan State Spartans. You guys know Michigan State is a powerhouse with Tom Izzo as their coach throughout many years. As their point guard, I have Magic Johnson. As their shooting guard, I would have Jason Richardson. As their small forward, you got Denzel Valentine. As their power forward, you got Draymond Green. And as their center, it would have to be Zach Randolph. Their sixth man would be Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, the one thing you gotta worry about this team is that they all are kind of tall. Magic Johnson being your point guard, that's a 6'9" point guard. That's kind of scary to look at for most of the other colleges that can't back up like the fact that they have a very tall point guard that is very talented like that. Not only that, Magic Johnson averaged like nearly a triple-double in college with 17 points, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds per game. So not like they're gonna out-rebound you, and you know that they have a floor general that's like historically and legendary known as one of the best point guards of all time as their main point guard for the team. Then you get Jason Richardson, the first wing player they got. He averaged like around 10 points per game and like 5 rebounds. And he had a surprisingly, like for me, it was surprisingly because I didn't know he was that good of a shooter coming out of college. But he had a 39% three-point shot. A lot of people forget because like most of the people in our generation saw Jason Richardson in the later half of his career. But Jason Richardson had bounce. That man would dunk on people furiously and ruthlessly with no like care at anything. He won a couple dunk contests too, I'm pretty sure. I believe it was 2003. Let me make sure. Jason Richardson dunk. Yeah, he won in 2003, and he also participated in 2002, but I'm not sure if he won in 2002. He won in 2003 and 2002. That shows you how good of a dunker this man was and like how like innovative he was with like the way he would slash to the rim. So I say as their 1-2 punch options they have, it's pretty good. Denzel Ballantyne is a little bit underrated in my opinion for at least in college because like for Michigan State, like he was a very fundamental part to like why the team was successful like the last couple of years, like in the last 10 years. He averaged 11 points, 6 rebounds, and he was a 40.8% three-point shooter. Not only that, I remember, no pun intended, but he made a buzzer beater on Valentine's Day. That's just hilarious because his name is Denzel Ballantyne. But overall, in college, Denzel Ballantyne was really a good shooter, and you could always depend on him to like make a big shot for the Spartans when they were like trying to make runs in the March Madness. Although that didn't always go to plan because the first year Denzel Ballantyne was there, they lost to Middle Tennessee State, and they were a 2 seed and got upset by a 15 seed. That's just embarrassing. Now, a lot of people forget how good Draymond Green was in college, but god damn, this man's stats back it up. He had 10 points per game, 7.6 rebounds per game, and he almost averaged 3 assists. And not only that, but Draymond Green, the problem with him when going to the league was people didn't know what position he would play. In college, this man legit would play for you every position, like on the floor. That's the reason he was very good for Michigan State and is considered one of the greatest Michigan State Spartans of all time. Let's see, hold up. I want to check up how many awards he won in his collegiate career. Draymond Green college stats, Draymond Green college. Because he was a 2-time NCAA All-Region team. He was the Big Ten Player of the Year. He was a Big Ten All-Defensive team. He was a Big Ten Tournament MVP. That's surprising. I didn't know he won the MVP award for them. He stayed basically, I believe, for the 4 years in college. He graduated as a senior, which is very rare to see nowadays, like in the 2010s or in the 2000s with like NBA college players trying to go into the league. And he averaged about a block per game too, and about 1.2 steals, which is significantly impressive. It shows you how overall Draymond Green is and how much of a glue guy he is to like your team. So let's go back for a second. So if you have already Magic Johnson getting your rebounds and triple doubles, you got alongside him another triple double machine in Draymond Green, which makes the Michigan State Spartans team kind of scary. At the center, I was looking, and they really don't have an actual full-on center that's really good historically for them. But I felt like Sibo had to like fit the role of a center for that team because like if you already have Draymond Green, who's kind of an undersized power forward, Zach Randolph is kind of an undersized power forward, but he makes up for his muscle, body, and for his overall elbows and like uh just play style. Because like Sibo would be on everyone's dark alley team, no doubt about it. Mans was a beast for the Michigan State Spartans. He averaged around 11 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, and he had around like 58.7 field goal percentage. I feel like if you had the Draymond Green and Zach Randolph combo as your two big guys on the court, that would be a very difficult duo to score against. Now, offensively, this team, I feel like it's kind of stagnant. If you would put them into like from paper into actual practice, Magic Johnson would be the most like major contributor to them. And Magic Johnson relies on a lot of like the talent around him, I believe, because in order to get assists, you gotta have people on your team that can actually get buckets for you. And besides Jason Richardson and Denzel Valentine, I feel like their offensive like uh performance for the overall team kind of gets stagnant at times, with Magic Johnson having to do a lot of it. I forgot to mention, as their sixth man, I have Jaren Jackson Jr. He averaged 11 points per game, around 6 rebounds per game, and he also shot 39.6 from the three-point line. I wish Jaren Jackson Jr. would have stayed in college for a little bit more than the 1 year he did. He was one of the one and done guys, and he got drafted like in fifth in the draft by the Memphis Grizzlies, and he's got a good solid like career for the first years in the league. But I feel like if he would have stayed in college 1 more year, his stats would have probably inflated, and he probably would have dominated even more. So, as a replacement for Zach Randolph at the center, you got your sixth man, who's Jaren Jackson Jr., who can play both power forward and center position. So I feel like when you would have to replace someone, they wouldn't have that much of a drop off, but still the point stays in that they don't have that much offense to them. Now, in my opinion, I feel like this team could probably make it to a Final Four, or not even that. They could make it to a championship game. I just don't know if they would be able to win against all these other like all-time college teams you have at the disposal. If we're making like an all-time March Madness, like all-time college basketball teams March Madness. Following the Michigan State Spartans, I got the University of North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm a big fan of North Carolina, like in basketball. They're one of my favorite teams all time. So I'm gonna not be biased with this. But first off, their point guard is Charlie Scott. I'm not gonna lie to you, because I play 2K a lot, so I've known Charlie Scott from 2K, but I didn't know how good he was in college. I didn't even know he went to North Carolina. The man's dropped 22.1 points, and he had 7 rebounds per game. He played in a time where assists were in his stat, so we don't actually get to know how much assists he averaged. But he shot over 72% from the free throw line too. And Charlie Scott was pretty much like a beast for his North Carolina tenure. And like it sounds like he'd be the perfect point guard for the all-time greatest shooting guard I'm about to tell you guys. Because if you didn't know, the shooting guard for North Carolina is Michael Jordan, of course. His airness, Air Jordan. And having a point guard that can score for Jordan is very important, because Jordan always had for his career like defensive oriented point guard. So I feel like if he had like that point guard that would help him in situations for like an offensive punch, it'd be pretty good for him. Jordan had some good statistics for college. He averaged like 17.7 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, and he almost averaged 2 assists per game. Not only that, but like Jordan pretty much was like it when he was in college already. Like people were already talking about Michael Jordan as one of the greatest college basketball players of all time, because like the man's was just clutch for North Carolina whenever they needed someone to come up in those situations. And overall, like his play style and everything he did for them was just always like a big factor into like why people attend the University of North Carolina today for basketball. If it wasn't for him, well, you don't know if you would have people like Tyler Hansbrough or like Cole Anthony like trying to go to UNC and make a name for themselves. Just some examples to mention. Uh, so with that 1-2 punch they have, I think they're pretty deadly already. Just saying. Now they're small forward. This was tough because I didn't know who I wanted to make their starter for the small forward position because they have so many good wings in the history of the school. But I went for Billy Cunningham, aka the Kangaroo Kid. I love that nickname, by the way. Man's averaged 24.8 points, 15.4 rebounds, and shot over 60% the free throw line. He was a 6'8" power forward, but he was like very skinny, very lanky. He was just that guy that had hops. No wonder they call him the Kangaroo Kid. So Jordan having that very athletic small forward next to him, I feel like would be really good for the overall offense since they have already an offensive-minded point guard that Michael Jordan wouldn't have to be stressed with having to carry the offensive load for the team all that time. Um, let's see. So as their power forward, it was a no-brainer. You gotta have big game James Worthy as your power forward. He played alongside Michael Jordan, and he was a good important part to those North Carolina teams back in the day. He averaged around 15 points, 7.5 rebounds, around 2.5 assists, and not only that, but like James Worthy, like in his NBA career, was a monster. And in college, like he wasn't that good of it, as you can see by the statistical numbers. But overall, big game James Worthy, you know you were scared of him driving to the rim or pulling up with a shot whenever he was dribbling the ball down the floor. Like he was a force to be reckoned with and someone that is a good contributor because he can also rebound. He's like a 6'9" forward, but he can play as a stretch four and rebound for you too, which is very important. And not like into like not trying to be about it like in today's NBA game where it's everyone just shoots threes and doesn't even like do post ups and things like that. He would be a big factor in the team's offense because he would easily be able to post up and just like with the vision he had, be able to see Michael Jordan cutting through backdoor cut, pass it to him. See like Charlie Scott pull up for a 3-point like on the top of the key and just pass it to him. Like he'd be perfect for that team's offensive scheme. Uh, as the starting center, I mean, it's hard to argue, but you have to have Bob McAdoo. The man was a beast. He averaged 19.5 points per game, over 10 rebounds per game, and he shot over 70% from the line. Bob McAdoo was arguably the greatest basketball player for North Carolina history before Jordan came into play. So like, and people in our age like don't really know about Bob McAdoo because he played so early, like in the start of basketball. But like, if you look up his highlights, if you look at his plays, this man was a beast overall. So I think they have that big guy that can provide offense, defense, and shooting that would be good to fit with the overall scheme of this team. And I forgot to mention, like Michael Jordan, James Worthy, and Bob McAdoo are very serviceable defenders. Like to say it like that because Mans could defend for their position for the whole game. So even though they're like a powerhouse offensively, in my opinion, they still will be able to hold their own against other teams and defense. Like if you were to have a matchup with North Carolina and Michigan State here, sure, Michigan State might have the better defense than North Carolina, but that's the Michigan State defense would not be able to score on North Carolina and would not only be able to and wouldn't be able to stop North Carolina's offense. As a sixth man for North Carolina, I had to put half man, half a Mason, aka Vince Carter, in here. He can play both shooting guard, small forward, and he would just be the perfect six man for the team because he can play like a bunch of positions. Uh, he averaged around 12 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, and he assisted like 2 times a game. So as the prime player from the bench for University of North Carolina, I feel like Vince Carter would be a good fit for them. As in regards of like them going on a March Madness run, They got Michael Jordan. I think they're good. I think they can win a title easily. No doubt about it. Now, and this, I don't know exactly how well they all those pieces would gel together, but I feel like people like Charlie Scott and Michael Jordan would like take the helm and like be good leaders for like that team as a foundation. Following that up, we got Duke University. I'm not gonna lie, I hate them to death because they always like beat North Carolina when it matters. Their starting point guard would be no one other than Kyrie Irving. I know he only played 11 games for them in his like college career because of injuries, but in those 11 games he was a beast. He averaged 17.5 points. He did like 4.3 assists, and he shot a whopping 46.2 3-point percentage, which already gives them a point guard that is an offensive option that like teams will have to worry about, which I feel like Magic Johnson for Michigan State would be able to guard, but I don't know about Charlie Scott for North Carolina will be able to help hold his own against him. Now, as a shooting guard, we got the greatest basketball player to come out of the University of Duke, which is MC Splashwater, JJ Redick. Now, this man averaged 20 points per game, 2.2 assists per game. You don't need him to pass because he's got a 40.3 3-point percentage. And I feel like if you have JJ Redick and Kyrie Irving as your two guards, that's a very worrisome duo for a defense to look into like the game before and be like, damn it, we gotta guard these two guys because they're both excellent shooters in college. So you would have to watch out for them. Then we got Grant Hill as a small forward for this team. Grant Hill was a beast. People forget it because he got injured a lot, but he was a beast. He got compared to like if 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 he would have stayed the whole time of his career in the league and not have been stopped by injuries, he would have been LeBron before LeBron. I said it, okay? I said it. Manson College averaged 14.9 points, 3.6 assists, and he averaged 6.0 rebounds. Like Grant Hill was up there crashing the boards and like doing stuff for Duke teams. And like I remember because I watched a lot of ESPN's plus basketball documentary series that's called Love is Basketball. Like when Mike Krzyzewski, I know I butchered the name, but I'm not gonna apologize for it. Mike Krzyzewski, the coach for Duke University, one of the greatest coaches of all time, to be fair. Like in his second year, he recruited Grant Hill to get there because they couldn't get over the hump and beat University of Las Vegas when they were led by Larry Johnson. Not only that, it was the good player to pair alongside the center for this all-time Duke team, which I have being Christian Laettner, because they just couldn't do it by them. Christian Laettner couldn't do it himself. He needed someone to help him with the offensive support that he needed in that team. Christian Laettner averaged 16.6 points, averaged around 8 rebounds, and averaged around 2 assists. Christian Laettner was like, it's sad that he didn't make it into the league or wasn't successful, but he was a part of the original dream team as a college player. Like he was viewed upon as to be like the next great coming of a big guy for USA basketball. And in college, well, in college he held his own because he was a beast and like he's one of the greatest Duke players to ever play. Now, to no one's surprise, the power forward for this team is Zion Williamson. My God, if I have to tell you about Zion, because if you don't already know, then I'm gonna tell you about it then. Because he averaged 16 points. He averaged 22.6 points, around 9 rebounds, and shot over 68% from the field. He's a 6'6" power forward that's like 250, 260 pounder with the bounce of like a Vince Carter and Spud Webb combined. Like his body type isn't supposed to play basketball. It doesn't make sense, but the man can be the future of basketball after LeBron, Giannis, Kevin Durant, Kawhi all like start retiring. I've said it here, like if he doesn't get derailed by injuries, Zion will be like the next face of the NBA. And the hype was real for him in college. Like the team he had with RJ Barrett and Cameron Reddish, like even though they didn't win the chip his year, that was still a pretty good team that you'd be scared to face against. And as the sixth man, I had no one else than Carlos Boozer. And this was the hardest one to pick because like they have people like Jason Tatum, Elton Brand, Brandon Ingram. I can keep on going with like people that deserve like the sixth man spot, but I give it to Carlos Boozer because like he had a very good career in Duke University. He averaged around 15 points, 7.2 rebounds, and he shot over 63% in the field, which is pretty good still for college. And thinking about it, in the NBA, his game transcended into a power forward, but he was considered a center in college, and he played the role of a center really good in college. So he could be a power forward, he could be a center for whenever Stein or Christian Laettner would need a breather. And I feel like this team would honestly have a good chance at winning a title too. They have shooters, they have two forwards that can score too, and that can defend their position. And they got a big guy that can do a little bit of defense, not really, but that can do his own in offense. But that's the one thing I would say would be the biggest weakness with the Duke University team. Their defense would probably not be up par with like North Carolina's or Michigan State. JJ Redick and Kyrie Irving are defensive liabilities, and I feel like they'd be easy pawns for like pick and roll and then just like post up or just shoot a jumper over them. They would not be able to do anything that much on defense. If you were to next, I did some research and I have LSU, the Tigers. As their point guard, you would have Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. So I keep telling people, this man was Steph Curry before his time. And I feel like he's a little underappreciated, but I'll go into that later. But he averaged 29 points per game in college. He averaged 3.6 assists, and he averaged a 37.2 percentage from the 3-point line. This man was basically an offensive-minded point guard. Like, he's a Kyrie Irving on steroids type situation, in my opinion. And then it doesn't stop there. The shooting guard that you would pair with him is no one else than Pistol Pete, the guy that LSU names their court after nowadays. If you didn't know, Pistol Pete still holds the record for most points per game average in NCAA college basketball history with 44.2. Yeah, I said it, 44.2. Not only that, he still managed to average over 6.4 rebounds per game, and he averaged 5 assists per game. Pistol Pete was a beast in college, and people were scared to play against him. I've seen footage. I've seen highlights. The man was an offensive machine. So having those two offensive-minded point guards that could also do a tiny bit of defense, it's a pretty good duo to have as your guard duo. Now, as a small forward, I know he's a point guard technically in the NBA right now, but I would have to have Ben Simmons there because the 1 year he had in LSU was pretty good. He had 19.2 points per game. He averaged over 11.8 rebounds and averaged around 5 assists. Even though the team wasn't that good and he couldn't lead them to like a March Madness bid, Ben Simmons in college was like one of those players that people were like, okay, Ben Simmons is going to be the real deal when he enters the league. Sadly, he hasn't developed a jumper, but when you have Pistol Pete and you have Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf as your guards that are very excellent shooters, I feel like you could just forget about Ben Simmons' lack of a shooting ability and just put him as a third ball handler if you need it to be that for the case. Then as the power forward, you have no one else than Bob Pettit. Bob Pettit, I know he's an oldie, but like as people say, he's a goodie or a goldie. Man's averaged 27 points per game. He averaged 14 rebounds per game, and he averaged 65% from the free throw line. Bob Pettit was a monster for LSU. I just say he averaged 27 points. The offense for this team is crazy. And I haven't even mentioned the center, which I know you guys are waiting for. No one else than Big Baby Diesel, Shaquille O'Neal, was the center for the all-time LSU team. Shaquille O'Neal, when he came to LSU, it was like the first time an African-American player like of his quality had decided to go to LSU to play basketball. And my God, he took advantage of that because they're like in the documentary series I just mentioned, Love is Basketball. There's an episode on when he decided to go to LSU and how the coach recruited him. He was in a land of a bunch of like racist people, and like he wasn't taking that well into the college, but he still got everyone to like love to fall for him in a sense. Like they all with time were like, okay, Shaquille O'Neal is a beast. We kind of got a root for him when he started playing for them, as he averaged 21.6 points per game, 13.5 rebounds per game, and a 61 field goal percentage. He was a big part to those LSU teams during the 90s that had like stints in those March Madness tournaments. Not only that, having Bob Pettit and Shaquille O'Neal as your two big guys, that's very good duo to have against like bigs like Bob McAdoo, Zion Williamson, or like Zach Randolph, like I mentioned now, because they would be able to defensively and offensively hold their own. And I feel like they got the best big man duo that I mentioned so far, and the best offensive guard duo that I mentioned so far. After 6 man, this was kind of tough because I thought about guys like Gerald Martin, Antonio Blakely, uh, who else? Yeah, but I have to give it to Garrett Temple. He currently plays for the Brooklyn Nets, and his whole time in the NBA, he's been known as a 3-and-D guy, like he can shoot and defend for his position. And in college, he didn't average that well. He was like a 6.7 point per game scorer, averaged around 4 rebounds, but he also surprisingly averaged around 4 assists as well. But I feel like whenever in the situations you want to have more of a uh, shooting group around Shaq and Pettit, since Ben Simmons can shoot, you could easily interchange Ben Simmons with Garrett Temple. And when you need to rest Pistol Pete or you need to rest Abdul Rauf, easily jump Ben Simmons back in because he can do his own as a ball handler. Overall, I feel like this team has a could go on a run for March Madness, but I don't see him being like a Final Four or like a championship team against these other all-time teams. I feel like the offense is there, but defensively, their only real good contributors for that department would be Shaquille O'Neal and Bob Pettit. They really wouldn't be able to guard against defend. They wouldn't be able to defend against the other guards in this league per se. But offensively, they are there, and they are the best team in my opinion in this list that offensively focused wise. And if the offense is what would lead them to a championship, then I wouldn't be surprised. Following the LSU Tigers, we have the UCLA Bruins as a team that I researched here. Their point guard would be no one else than Baron Davis. Baron Davis was a dog in college. This man was a beast. He averaged around 13.6 points. He averaged around 3.8 rebounds. And he also averaged over 5 assists. And I feel like Baron Davis, alongside the player I'm going to say now as a shooting guard, which is Russell Westbrook, UCLA doesn't have that like top tier like talented shooting guard besides people like Drew Holiday or like Zach LaVine. But like you guys didn't want to hear me talk about Drew Holiday or Zach LaVine. You guys wanted me to talk about like Russell Westbrook. So Mans in college averaged 12.7 points per game, 4.3 assists per game, and he averaged 1.6 steals. So that 2 point guard lineup that they would have with Baron Davis and Russell Westbrook would be very deadly in my opinion, because Baron Davis would be the one with the, even though they're both slashing point guards, Baron Davis could still be a good serviceable shooter. So you're not risking having to play two slashing oriented players with having Westbrook not really being a good shooter on the court. And you got Kiki Van de Weeg, I hope I pronounced that right, as the small forward for the Bruins team. Averaged around 12.2 points per game, around 5 rebounds per game, and 1.5 assists per game. Kiki Van de Weeg was a baller. Like the man was a really good shooter and would be able to get a shot off from anywhere you needed him to be. Like in 2K nowadays, if I ever play with like Kiki, this man will knock down every shot I take with him. It's unstoppable. So he would be another reason I feel like this team would be really good all around it, like in an offensive scheme purposes. Because when the player you got like Davis and Westbrook that don't always shoot jump shots, but that could get you a jump shot from now and then, they would have like a 3-point specialist in the team. Then you got the power forward for them, my boy Kevin Love. This man was a monster in college, and there's the reason why Russell Westbrook and Kevin Love had that good ass year when they both played in UCLA. He averaged 17.5 points per game. He averaged around 10.6 rebounds per game, and he averaged 1.4 blocks per game. And Kevin Love was a monster. The man's had the accolades to go. Not to say accolades, but the man, as soon as he like played his first game for UCLA, you already knew like he was gonna be a problem for when he entered the NBA, and it kind of came through because in those Minnesota teams that he played for, he was like a star player, and he would average like 15 rebounds and like 30 points easily night in and night out. And he was a big part of like the team that won the chip in Cleveland for LeBron. Because if it wasn't for Kyrie and if it wasn't for Kevin Love, LeBron wouldn't have won that chip in Cleveland that year, in my opinion. Uh, Kevin Love was an All Pac-12, the All Pac-12 team member. He was the Pac-12 freshman. He was a Pac-12 Rookie of the Year, and he was the most important player of the Pac-12 tournament as well. And I feel like having him as the power forward for the team, alongside Kiki Bandewee, Russell Westbrook, and Baron Davis, I feel like this team would have a good shot at going for a championship as well. And their center, none other than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Back in college, he was known as Lou Alcindor, but then that doesn't matter because the man still averaged 26.4 points, 15.5 rebounds, and had over a 63.9 field goal percentage. And Kareem is arguably the greatest college basketball player of all time. He won around 3 to 4 straight championships for the Bruins. I want to fact check because I want to make sure that I'm not wrong with this. Because he was part of the teams that had my bad, I said that wrong. Thanks to him and Bill Walton during that stretch, the UCLA Bruins won like 12 straight championships and were like a dynasty before like other teams could even do anything. Yeah, so actually Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a 3-time champion. So I just checked that up. And he only played 3 years in college, which makes sense. But like I said, he's arguably the greatest college basketball player for things like that. The man's was just a beast. And defensively, he is a monster because he averaged over 2.5 blocks too. So like you already know you're gonna be scared to play against them. And as their sixth man, well, who other than Bill Walton, who I just mentioned? He averaged 20 points per game, 15.7 rebounds, and a 65 field goal percentage. Having him as a rotation player for yourself so that you can like sub Kareem for stints or Kevin Love, for example, it's just crazy to think about because that means that UCLA would have like an even better defense that I've mentioned other teams like Shaq with Pettit or like Randolph and Green would have for their big guys in the team. And the fact that they have Bill Walton on the bench show you that they could afford to give rest to the other big guys they have starting. Overall, in my opinion, I feel like this team would win the championship in no doubt. Just having Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as like the centerpiece of the team, and with the supporting cast they got around him, I feel like this is a team that's made for like a Final Four game with that intensity and pressure that comes into it, like with those types of situations, and that all these 6 players would be able to play and make plays during the stretch of a March Madness game. Following UCLA, I got the University of Kansas, the Jayhawks, Rock Chalk, whatever you want to call it. Their point guard is, well, I actually was debating on putting Mario Chalmers, but it's because, well, obviously people know the shot that he made in March Madness for Kansas to win a title. But his stats don't really support like the fact for him to be here, so I went for JoJo White instead. The man was in the time he was ahead of his time. He had like 15.5 points, around 5.5 rebounds, and around 7.5 assists as well, which gives Kansas a floor general and a passing oriented point guard. As a shooting guard, I went for Andrew Wiggins. He was supposed to be the next LeBron, but obviously, as you know, if you don't even know who Andrew Wiggins is, then that's my point. But man's averaged 17.1 points per game, 5.9 rebounds per game, and 1.5 assists per game. And he's one of the best players Kansas has had throughout its years because with the hype he had surrounding him, and he played alongside Joel Embiid as well. Like that team was supposed to be like one of the greatest of all time. Obviously, it didn't came into uh, into full circle, and they didn't win a championship. But him and Joel Embiid were part of the reason Kansas had a really good team the year that they both played for them. As a small forward, arguably one of the greatest Kansas players of all time, Paul Pierce, the truth, blunt talk, nothing but the truth. So we got to talk nice about Paul Pierce here. He averaged 16.4 points per game, around 6.3 rebounds per game, and he shot over 35% from three-point land. Paul Pierce would be the one player that this Kansas team would need from down the stretch when you need a clutch bucket that be like, okay, let's give you the ball, you do what you do. So it'd be like their prime offensive focus that they needed so far. As their power forward, Danny Manning, he was one of the greatest Kansas players of all time, averaged over 20 points per game, over 8.1 rebounds, and he shot over 74% from the line. And Danny Manning was really good for Kansas because he was like, after Wilt Chamberlain and JoJo White were there, he was one of those first people that brought attention to Kansas, and like kids further on were like, you know what? I want to go and play for Kansas because like they had Danny Manning and he brought Kansas a title. Like that's the overall reason he's like Mr. Kansas here because he brought overall a title. And you already heard me say their center. You got Wilt Chamberlain. You have to. Wilt is still the Big Dipper. He averaged 30 points per game. He averaged 18.3 rebounds and 3 blocks per game. That's just blasphemous. That's just crazy. And the man's averaged 100 points per game in the NBA. Imagine being alongside Paul Pierce, Danny Manning, JoJo White, and Andrew Wiggins as the starting rotation. How offensively sounded this team would have been, and just dishing out to Wilt all the time in the post, and see like the faces of the other centers being like, "Oh, we gotta guard this man." And I feel like UCLA would be the only team that could like hold their own defensively against them because like the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar versus Wilt Chamberlain matchup is a matchup that everyone wanted to see in college. I feel like, and I already mentioned their six-man too, Joel Embiid, the process, JoJo. This man in college was getting comparisons to Hakeem Olajuwon, and like today in the league, he's a beast too. He gets injured a lot, but like he's healthy, the man's will give you buckets and will be a force in defense. He averaged only 11.2 points per game, 8 rebounds per game, and 2.6 blocks per game. I feel like in college he was, with the stats that back it up, I feel like in college he was better defensively than he is known to be today in the league. And I feel like it also would give Kansas an option because Danny Manning as a power forward is 6'8", and you could say that's a little undersized, but in today's NBA that doesn't matter. But this is not concerning like today's NBA perspective. This is more like overall team and who could be good. So if you had to face teams with two pairs of big guys like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton, or like people like Shaq and Pettit, then I feel like that would be another option Kansas could use going forward if they were trying to go on a March Madness run. And in my opinion, this Kansas team defensively, besides Wilt Chamberlain and Danny Manning, I feel like they would struggle against the other teams in here, and that's why I don't think they would be like a championship winner. But they could probably make it to a Final Four run if like Wilt and like Danny Manning carried them. Like it all depends on how Wilt and Danny Manning would play for them, in my opinion. Now going on to the last two teams of this list, I have the University of UConn, the Huskies. I'm a big fan of the Huskies as well. They're one of my favorite college basketball teams ever since I've been watching the sport. As their point guard, no other than cardiac Kemba Walker. You know how good Kemba Walker is in college. The man would just be on highlight films and everything, and the man would be making great shots after great shots after great shots. Everyone remembers that step back jumper to win the game against Pittsburgh he had in the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden. The commentators were just going crazy, and it was just exciting moment. And they had started the first day of the tournament and had played every day following that. So they had played and won in like 4 or 5 straight games, and then in March Madness following that tournament, they have won the whole thing. So they have won and played a matter of like 10 to 11 games in that stretch run they have with Kemba Walker leading the way. He averaged 16.1 points, 4.1 steals, and surprising to me, he had over 1.7 steals, which I never would think of Kemba Walker as a defensive-oriented point guard, but in college that obviously is different. And having that good of an offensive point guard is a good combination when you think of, because they have for their shooting guard Ray Allen, Jesus Shuttlesworth. The man averaged 19 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, and a whopping 44.8 3-point percentage. That's just crazy. Mans was one of the reasons UConn was on the map thanks to Jim Calhoun. If Jim Calhoun wasn't there, then Ray Allen wouldn't be there. And without Ray Allen, the rest of the people in this team wouldn't have gone to UConn. That's a fact. So you got that 1-2 punch that could like go against any of these other schools here, in my opinion. With their small floor, you have Caron Butler, who averaged 18 points per game, 7.6 rebounds per game, and had like a 36.4 3-point percentage. He'd be a good offensive option for them. I feel like he wasn't that great of a like throughout his whole career. Like in the Washington Wizards when he played for them, he was an all-star a couple times, and he was like a good offensive like contributor. But like I feel like Caron Butler would be mainly like a 3-point spot up, catch and shoot, or just like get an occasional bucket, role type player for this team. As their power forward, they're gonna go with a small ball lineup, having Rudy Gay be the power forward for this team. He averaged 13.6 points per game. He averaged 5.9 rebounds per game, and he averaged over a 37 3-point percentage. Rudy Gay was really good for the UConn Huskies. I feel like him and Caron Butler as the forwards give UConn serviceable forward options to go along with the teams here, but they probably would not hold their own against them. Now, Rudy Gay had probably the best shooting of his life in UConn because in the league, I don't know if it's true that he had that issue that he didn't want to wear contacts, so he just played not being able to see in the court, and that's why his shooting went bad the later half of his career, and currently he's still in the league. But I feel like if you had Rudy Gay in college for this team playing, that would be a much better version for the UConn Huskies to have. As the center for the UConn Huskies, you would have Andre Drummond, who is a double-double machine in today's NBA. And I feel like it's underappreciated as well because he can't shoot. But he still holds his own and is like the role and plays the role of an old-fashioned center. He had 10 points per game. He had 7.6 rebounds per game. And he averaged over 2.7 blocks per game. And I feel like it's due to the fact that he only played 1 year in college and he was a very young player too, that these guys, that he would have been a perfect center option for the UConn Huskies in this all-time Team March Madness tournament setup. And I feel like thanks to him, they would have a center that could hold his own or at least try against centers like Shaq, Will Chamberlain, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And even Bob McAdoo too, not to discredit him. As their six-man option, no one else than Rip Hamilton. Man was a beast for UConn, averaged 19.8 points per game. He also had over 4.5 rebounds per game, and he had a 37.8 3-point percentage. And I feel like having Rip Hamilton be the sixth man for this team will be a good offensive option to switch around with Ray Allen, Rudy Gay, and Caron Butler, knowing that Rudy Gay can also play small forward. You can move up Caron Butler as a stretch four if you wanted to play like a really smaller lineup. And overall, I feel like this UConn team will have good offensive execution because they have Kemba Walker being an offensive oriented, but he can also play make when the situation comes, and having all these shooters at disposal and having a big guy that can primarily rebound and do putbacks. But defensively, I see this team being liable on that end and not being able to defend against all these other great teams. This is why I would say they would not be able to win a championship or go on a title run or even make it to the Final Four. They probably would be like an Elite Eight, Sweet 16 team if you were to make an all-time college basketball March Madness tournament. Finally, the last team I have here, and my dark horse / sleeper team for this, the Georgetown Hoyas. Now, I'm going to just name the names and then talk about them. You got Sleepy Floyd as the point guard, Allen the Answer Iverson as the shooting guard. You got Jeff Green as a small forward, Alonzo Mourning as the power forward, and Patrick Ewing as the center. Not only that, their sixth man is Dikembe Mutombo, and basically, I just read you the team. this team would be unstoppable to score. You would not be able to score on this team at all. First off, Sleepy Floyd had 17.7 points per game, 3.7 rebounds per game, 2.7 assists per game, and he was an underrated point guard for his time. The man would be the perfect floor general to put alongside Allen Iverson, who's an offensive-oriented score player, and he's just going to be shooting and scoring and doing everything. With Sleepy Floyd there, you have a point guard that is tall, kind of tall for his position at 6'3", but not only that, you would also have a point guard that you could just like have on the side, like relaxing or chilling when Allen Iverson would be taking over, because Allen Iverson wouldn't be doing that much of that distribution, and with his undersized, with the him being undersized for his position, you have someone that could also take the guarding responsibilities of like MJ or like Ray Allen or Russell Westbrook and all the other shooting guards I'm mentioning here, for example. Not only that, he averaged over like 2.7 steals per game, which is pretty impressive for like CP Floyd because I didn't expect that from him. Allen Iverson, no brainer. He would be a star player for his team and the star offensive focus. Jeff Green would play the role of like the supporting player here that could do both offense and defense, but you wouldn't depend on. He averaged 13.1 points per game, 6.5 rebounds per game, and 3.1 assists per game. So I feel like that's a good piece to have as a small forward for this team. And I forgot to mention, Iverson in college averaged 23 points per game, 4.6 assists per game, and he had a whopping 3.2 steals. So not only is this team gonna play their own in the perimeter and like defend the guards and the wings that come up against them, but their big guys are gonna do the job as well. Especially when you have Alonzo Mourning, who averaged 16.7 points, 8.6 rebounds, and 3.8 blocks per game. There's just no stopping that. Then you got Patrick Ewing, the man that was so like coveted as to be like the future of the New York Knicks. The man was the reason they rigged the lottery, and I think that Patrick Ewing deserves some recognition because 15.3 points per game. Okay, that's decent, right? He had 9.2 rebounds per game. That's really good for college. And then he had 3.6 blocks per game. So you already have a big man duo that both average at least minimum 3.6 blocks per game. That's going to be hard to score against. Not only that, the six man I gave him, the Kemba Mutombo, is known for blocking, the finger wag. Everything he does is just synonymous with defense. One of the greatest defensive players of all time, averaging 10 points, 8.6 rebounds per game, and 3.7 blocks. I feel like they got a serviceable big man rotation that could be holding their own against the other teams in this league. Now, that's the prime reason I say they're a dark horse team in this tournament, because everyone knows and everyone says defense wins championships. This team would be really good on defense, and they have offensive options as well. This is why I believe people, like, when they would face this team, they would probably be overconfident because it's Georgetown and they don't have like the prestige and all the history behind it like Duke has or North Carolina has or Kansas. But this team would be a force to be reckoned with in this March Madness tournament, and I can clearly see them being a good championship team candidate here. So that's it for that segment. And now I'm going to just talk a little bit about, like, since we were talking about college basketball, all-time teams, I'm going to go on about, like, all-time college basketball coaches. First that comes to mind is Mike Krzyzewski from the Duke University Blue Devils. The man basically used to be the coach for, like, USA basketball. And him being the coach for USA basketball, while he's still being a college coach, instead of them having an NBA coach, which, I mean, changed now because now they have Greg Popovich as the head coach of the Team USA team. I feel like Mike Krzyzewski is arguably the greatest college basketball coach of all time. And there's very hard to dispute against it. Like his coaching record, like I have it right here, right now. he wins almost at least 20 games per season at minimum. He's got all like overall a total of one 1,500 wins, and that's just crazy. Because I mean, to be fair, he's played. I mean, my bad. He's coached in for Duke a long time, but that's still really hard to get. Not everyone can get to 1,500 wins like that, and it's simple. And he's got a decent amount of tournament win titles as well in March Madness. I'm trying to see if I can find the actual number here. Not only that, but he's won ACC Coach of the Year 5 times. He's won the College Basketball Coach of the Year 2 times. The Naismith Coach of the Year 3 times. And people forget, but he was a coach at Army as well. That's where he played for, and that's where he started his coaching career. I'm trying to see if I can find how many times he won the title. Tournament he's won. Wow, I can't even count that. Many times like won a national title. It doesn't show me here, but overall, I couldn't find it. I apologize. But Mike Krzyzewski is one of the greatest college basketball coaches of all time. Then you have people like Tom Izzo, Bill Self, and Jim Boeheim, which I feel like they're on a tier below Mike Krzyzewski because these guys have been able to build programs that have been very good and serviceable like throughout the years of their respective careers. Like for example, Jim Boeheim with Syracuse, although he had the scandal that happened, regardless of that, they got one ship with Carmelo Anthony and Hakeem Warwick on that team in 2003, and then they've always been able to serve to put out teams that have good players and pieces and go on crazy March Madness runs that always has people thinking, how are they doing this? They should not even be here in the first place. You also got Tom Izzo from Michigan State. They are a force to be reckoned with. Thanks to him, he's got a decent amount of titles at his disposal. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of notable Michigan State alumni that have played for him. And I feel like Thomas was a big part of why Michigan State is always #1 preseason AP, even if they only have people like Cassius Winston as their best offensive option. But when you think of college basketball, Thomas was definitely one of the first people that come to mind. Bill Self, Mans has been able to make Kansas into a top 5 team throughout the U.S. year after year after year. And it doesn't matter if they lose like the amount of freshmen they have, he'll bring in more freshmen. Like this year they have people like Jalen Green or Josh Green. He was a good player for them. And they have a center that I love, Udoka Asabuki. That man's is a monster. He looks like a Shaquille O'Neal 2.0. I don't know if his game will translate to the league that well, but time will tell. And we don't even know if he's going to be in the draft. But it shows you that Bill Self has turned teams that had Mario Chalmers as the best player win a title, and that's more of a better coach than like team situation, in my opinion. Another person I want to mention is John Calipari, which I just realized I did not create a team for the Kentucky Wildcats, but most of those players would have been like 2000 and on. Like only people I can think of the top of my head for like Kentucky's all-time team would probably be Dan Issel and Cliff Hagan. That would probably have been like old school players that you could put in the lineup. But John Calipari is a recruiting machine, and it shows because like he basically recruits players and tells them, "Yo, you want to make it to the league? I can get you to the league." And he's done a good job with it. I believe in one of the drafts he had like over 7 or 8 first-round draft picks. That's impressive. No other coach can say that. Not only that, they had that one Kentucky team with Karl Anthony Towns and Devin Booker that almost went undefeated until the championship game. They lost to Wisconsin. But he's had a good amount of teams, and he's won a decent amount of championships. And not only that, in Kentucky, he was a coach before in UMass too, and he had Marcus Camby there, and like it was just John Calipari deserves to be up there as well in the coaching conversation. And and that's pretty much it. I apologize because this is my first time ever doing a podcast episode. So if the quality or just my voice or overall like vibe of the way I sound is not up there, I will improve on it for the next episodes to come. I would like to hear any suggestions and things that I could change. If you think this was garbage, tell me this was garbage. I actually want to know what you think and see how I can improve on it. I'll be trying to do an episode each week, and we're going to be ranging from topics. It's not always going to be basketball. So if you aren't interested in today's conversation primarily on basketball, I apologize, but that's pretty much it for today. So I appreciate for you guys listening to me and paying attention, and that's a wrap. Peace out.